If you're watching this video, it's because you're interested in getting a job in cybersecurity, specifically at the entry level. Whether that means you have absolutely no experience whatsoever, or maybe you're working in IT and you're trying to make the switch into cybersecurity. So what I did was I went on ChatGPT, which is an artificial intelligence chatbot. You can ask questions and it will respond back to you. And I asked it to interview me for an entry-level cybersecurity role. So that's what we're going to do in this video. So the first question that was asked was, what initially drew you to pursue a career in cybersecurity? Now, if you don't know, I've worked in cybersecurity for a while now. We're talking about a decade of experience in cybersecurity. I've been an analyst, I've been an engineer, I've been a manager, I've been a consultant, I've been an architect. So I've been a lot of different roles in this career field. And I would say the one thing that really drew me to this career field is a natural interest in technology. So if you haven't watched my other videos of my career progression and how I went from sales into cybersecurity, then I definitely recommend going back to watch those videos. But one of the things that I noticed when I was initially looking to get into cybersecurity was in my sales job, I had a lot of clients, a lot of customers that were really interested in data security and information and cybersecurity. And so that really piqued my interest as far as a career field to go into. Personally, I didn't want to stay in that sales role or the dedicated sales kind of role because it wasn't really that interesting anymore. And a lot of those kind of jobs, you're really focusing on commission-based sales, which means that your income can fluctuate a lot, right? One time you can make a lot of money in a month, another month you might not make any money or very little money. And so that's really important in that kind of role. And I was just done. I was ready to move on. I wanted to actually get into a technology role. And for me, when I was going through my undergrad program, I actually thought about going into MIS or CIS, Management Information Systems or Computer Information Systems. And those are basically forms of IT degrees, right? Like it's very focused on enterprise applications and enterprise technologies. But because I played baseball in college, it really didn't align with my schedule. So I actually had to go with business because that was what aligned with my schedule. Those were when the classes were. They wouldn't conflict as much when we would do things like traveling for games or having a bunch of practices or doing all the kinds of things that we had to do for our program. So that was really what interested me even back then. And frankly, I had played around with a lot of different technologies with Linux. I had played a lot of video games online, and that seems to be a natural progression, right? A lot of people that play video games tend to get into cybersecurity. We like that gamification kind of aspect of things and that cat and mouse kind of aspect where you're trying to do something and then somebody else is trying to beat you. And it's just this back and forth, right? It's like that game of Pong where it's like it hits the paddle and it's like boop, 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 and the ball just keeps going back and forth. So, for me, that was really why I wanted to get into cybersecurity. Question number 2, what kind of training or education have you received in the field of cybersecurity? So again, I've covered this in a lot of other videos, but for me, my undergraduate degree was in business administration, so it was completely unrelated, right? And I guess there are some ties with that because you do deal a lot with the business, but as far as the cybersecurity aspect of things, completely unrelated, right? So what I actually did when I decided to go back and try to get into cybersecurity was I went for a master's degree program. And specifically, my degree program was a Master of Science in Information Assurance and Cybersecurity, which means that I learned a lot about policies as well as the technical aspects of things. So I learned a whole bunch of different aspects of things. It wasn't just policy, it wasn't just technical information, kind of a combination of both. And especially if you're coming from an unrelated background, maybe something that isn't technical, that's a pretty good route to go because it's not going to be this dramatic shift in how things are done and a dramatic shift in all the information that you have to retain in your brain. Don't get me wrong, you've got to know the basics, right? Like there's no getting around that and you'll have to learn that, but you're not going to have to dive super deep into things like programming or some of these different languages that you would if you did like a computer science type of degree. So I went the degree route. That's what I had known because I had the bachelor's degree, the undergrad degree in business. I didn't know anything about cybersecurity certifications when I was trying to get in the field. I'm not sure how that would have impacted my decision if I knew about that, right? Like that could have been a path where I could have started to explore into and study before I even tried to go down the degree path. And maybe I would have got a job before then and decided that I didn't want to get a master's degree. But again, I didn't know about that. And so I went the degree path. As far as other training that I do have other training. So I've been through training courses that were provided by my employer and they were funded through them. I've also done some SANS and GIAC training. So I've actually gone to 3 different courses for SANS. I did the GSEC training course, I did the GCIH, and the GWAPT. So Web Application Penetration Testing, Incident Handling, and the Security Essentials. I've also done some other training courses and things like that too. I've been through the OSCP material, so there are training course for that. I've done Try Hack Me, I've done Hack the Box. I've done a lot, but again, I don't want you to get thrown off by this because for me, right, with a lot of my answers to these questions, I have experience in the career field. When I actually got my internship in my degree program, I had only done some coursework in my degree program, right? Like I hadn't gone through a bunch of these technical training courses, and my level of skill set was actually pretty low compared to what I would expect somebody that's really ready to get into this career field. But I was able to land that internship and still continue to build my skills, right? And I bring that up because a lot of times it is about the right time and the right place and having a good background to bring you in because that's going to attract employers. You don't always have to be the most prepared or the most trained person to get into this career field. And that's really important to understand. Now, because I got that internship and because I continue to increase my knowledge, that led to me being able to land a full-time role, right? Like I didn't stay at that same level of knowledge as my internship. I think if I would have, I probably would have had a lot more difficult time trying to actually get a full-time job or really even getting interviews because I wouldn't have much to put on my actual resume. But keep that in mind. You have to keep progressing. Even if you get a job or an offer really early on, you don't want to stay static. You want to continue to evolve and build your skills because that's going to give you not only a better answer to this kind of question, but it's also going to make you a better candidate overall. Question number 3, can you describe your understanding of various cybersecurity threats such as viruses, malware, and data breaches? So for me, one of the things that immediately comes to mind if I was asked this question in an interview is to compare viruses and malware, right? Viruses are part of malware. They are malicious software, but then you also have things like rootkits, you have worms, and then understanding the distinction between those, right? Like, does it require user intervention? Does a user have to click on an executable to launch that malicious program? Or is it going to just start replicating throughout your network on its own? Those are really important distinctions. As far as data breaches, really think about what data breaches are, how they're defined, right? Your incident response policies and plans. And so what's classified as an incident? Maybe you have a regulation that identifies what an actual data breach is, that defines maybe how many records were accessed by that attacker. And really understanding that interrelationship between that, right? You might not have a data breach, but you might have a virus on a system. So keep that in mind. You have to really understand the context and how those things interact with each other in order to actually explain and understand and define the question or the answer, the response to the interviewer. The other thing that I would do with this question is actually list some common malware that's out there, right? I would really talk about ransomware, especially because ransomware is one of the most hot topics right now when it comes to malicious software, malware, attacker techniques. But if you have other examples that you can list and how that whole process worked, so how a computer got infected and maybe how it spread through the network and impacted other systems, maybe talking about incident response process, right? And really evolving that discussion and talking about things like, how do you prepare for that? So what do you do before anything even happens? How do you identify an incident or a data breach? How do you contain that? So how do you respond? What do you do in order to make sure that it doesn't get any worse? How do you eradicate that? So how do you actually remove that from those systems and recover those systems? Are you restoring backups? And then recovery, right? What are you doing to get that system back to its state where it's not infected and it doesn't have that malware on it? And then, of course, lessons learned. what do you do in order to document the lessons learned, right? So really think about it in that context. The more information that you can give on a question, especially like this, the more that it shows your understanding of what is actually involved in the process, what these kind of attacks are, and what do you ultimately do to recover and get things back to normal. If you're enjoying the content so far, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. That way YouTube knows that you enjoy this content. Also, check out the description for more resources related to this video. All right, let's get back to the content. Question number 4. How would you approach identifying and mitigating a security breach in a network or a system? Now, again, this kind of goes back to what I was just saying with the incident response process and those procedures in order to get things from an infected state back to a normal state, right? So again, that's the incident response process. Actually preparing, making sure that you have everything in place when something happens. Identifying that's an actual incident or an attack. Containing that attack or that incident or that malware, right? Then eradicating it, removing it from the systems, removing it from your networks. Recovery, actually performing backup restoration, getting those systems back in order, back to their normal state. And then lessons learned, documenting all that stuff that you learned and everything that you did so you can improve that process the next time and make it even better and more effective when you have an incident. If you have a good example of something that's actually happened that you can actually put into that process and those different stages, that would be even better. So definitely research different incidents and just think about the different steps that would go along with that. So what would you do to prepare? What would you do to identify it? What would you do to contain it, eradicate it, recover? And then what would you document at the end? So that would be the best way to answer one of those questions. Question number 5. How do you stay current with the latest advancements and technology in cybersecurity? So this question right here is really getting at what do you do in your spare time or what do you do when you're at work to make sure that you're current? Are you watching things like my threat intel briefing to understand what the events are that are happening in the current week or in previous weeks? So that way you're prepared. Are you reading threat intelligence reports from actual vendors, any kind of security advisories, or any kind of distribution lists that they have? Like GIAC, they have actual distribution email lists that you can get on if you score a certain percentage on a certification exam. There's all kinds of different lists like that out there. There's blogs and all kinds of different resources that you can utilize to actually stay current. The other thing would be certifications or training. What kind of training are you doing to make sure that your skills are current? With training, things evolve over time. That's why you see certification exams change every so often. Some will change every few years. Some will change a little bit more frequently than that. Some will change less frequently than that. And that should be relative to the area that it's actually covering, right? Sometimes things don't change that often. Policies aren't going to change super often. So a lot of that stuff doesn't have to be updated as often. Maybe incident response procedures or actual penetration testing things, hacking tools, stuff like that. That stuff is going to change a lot more frequently. So I would say the more tied to actual technology that it is, the more likely that that's going to change and the more frequently that's going to change. So you just have to stay current with that. And then the ultimate thing with that too is if you have certifications that are tied to certain areas or certain training, keeping those current will also show that you're staying relevant and staying current, because a lot of them will actually require you to do continuing education credits or continuing professional education. They call it all kinds of different things. But basically, you take other courses, you attend webinars, you do all kinds of stuff, and you submit so many credit hours per year, or usually at least per 3-year cycle, to actually maintain those certifications. Question number 6. How do you see the field of cybersecurity evolving in the next 5 to 10 years? So this is a great question, right? This really shows that you understand kind of how things are evolving, or at least you have an idea of how things are going to evolve. You understand how things are currently, and then also kind of what you see on the horizon, right? So right now, what I would say is that cloud is becoming more and more important, right? We're shifting more and more into the cloud with a lot of companies. You know, obviously over the last couple of years with the things that have happened, we've seen a lot of companies start that shift, start that evolution, but not every company is pushing everything into the cloud, right? Going forward, there will be more and more stuff in the cloud. There's more applications, there's more services, things like that. So personally, that's what I see as being a huge thing going forward. We also have to do things like actually identifying incidents and attacks a lot earlier, right? That's been a huge hot button in the past because the quicker you can identify an attack or malicious event, the quicker you can address it or at least start working towards addressing it with that incident response process. So those two things are really huge. There's definitely other things that are really important, and you could definitely list some of these other things. But personally, those are the things that I would list if I was asked this question, because those are the things that I see being huge issues, right? So really keep that in mind. And then also another thing to give you kind of a bonus one, a third one would be regulations. So increase regulations, especially in the privacy area. There are so many privacy regulations that are coming through, right? We've seen things like GDPR in Europe, and that's been increasing as far as its presence. But we're also seeing in like the United States, actual states implement privacy regulations. At the federal level, it's a little bit behind, right? Like it's a little bit lagging from some of these other areas. But we're seeing states actually go after companies that aren't protecting privacy data for customers, for their clients. So, and we see things like HIPAA and other kinds of regulations too that actually monitor and require you to protect that data, PCI DSS. But again, we're going to see increased regulations in those areas especially, but we'll see it in other areas too. Question number 7. How do you plan to further develop your skills and progress in your career in cybersecurity? So this is a really important question from a career standpoint. You always should have a plan of what you're trying to do and where you're trying to go, right? Think about right now. I have these certifications. I have this training. Maybe I want to go this way and get into a different area like penetration testing. Maybe I'm currently in an analyst role or an engineer role, an architect role, and I really want to get into a management position, but I don't have some of the major management certifications. Maybe I don't have a CISSP. Maybe I need to get that. Maybe I don't have a CISM or a CISM from ISACA. Maybe I need to get that, right? And really thinking forward about where you want to go and then developing that plan of how you're going to get there, right? What are the steps that you've got to take in order to get to that endpoint? So it's really important because it not only shows that you're thinking ahead as far as where you want to go in your career, and that can shape what kind of training and certifications and things you go for, but it also helps employers to identify kind of where you fit into their program, into their team. Maybe they don't have a lot of people that want to get into leadership, but you do. And so you can really take advantage or actually be put into situations where you can lead some projects, you can lead some efforts, and really take control, take leadership of those aspects, and really kind of help fill out their team. So it's really, really important that you fill that out and you kind of understand where you're going to go and then the steps that you need to do in order to get there. Question of the day. What are you doing to prepare for cybersecurity interviews? Let me know down in the comment section below. Those were the 7 questions that ChatGPT asked me when I asked it to interview me about entry-level cybersecurity roles. So I hope you enjoyed those questions and it gave you some insight about the kind of questions that you might get asked. Also keep in mind that I actually have 3 other videos about cybersecurity interview questions, and I highly recommend that you go check those out too. As always, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. That way YouTube knows you enjoyed the content. Check out the description for more resources related to this video, and I'll see you next time.